Long before modern nations, before castles, cannons, and empires of gunpowder, the ancient world was shaped by men whose names would survive for thousands of years. Men who crossed continents not with machines, but with marching armies, fading maps, and ambition powerful enough to move entire civilizations. One would rise from the Republic of Rome, a city of marble, politics, and silent ambition. The other would emerge from the mountains of Macedon, carrying the dream of conquering the known world before reaching the age of 30. Tonight, you will walk through the lives of two of history's most influential conquerors, Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great. Julius Caesar was born in the year 100 BCE, during a time when the Roman Republic was already becoming one of the dominant powers of the Mediterranean world. Rome itself was crowded, ambitious, and deeply political. Narrow stone streets wound between markets, temples, and government buildings, while senators debated power beneath high marble ceilings. The Republic valued honor, military success, and influence. Reputation could shape a man's entire future. Caesar was born into a respected family, though not among the wealthiest of Rome's elite. From an early age, he entered a society where alliances mattered as much as ability, and where politics could become as dangerous as war itself. As a child, he would have walked through busy Roman forums lit by oil lamps in the evening hours, hearing distant conversations about elections, generals, and expanding territories. Rome during this period was powerful, but unstable beneath the surface. Rival political factions competed constantly for influence. Wealth inequality grew larger, and military commanders were beginning to gain enormous loyalty from their armies. These tensions slowly changed the balance of the Republic. Caesar grew up observing this world carefully. He studied rhetoric, law, history, and military tradition. Like many ambitious young Romans, he understood that success required more than intelligence alone. It required timing, alliances, and public image. Yet despite his political awareness, his early years were filled with uncertainty. Rome's internal conflicts often placed powerful families at risk, depending on which faction controlled the government. During periods of political violence, Caesar himself was forced into dangerous situations that threatened both his position and his future. But these experiences also shaped his resilience. He learned to navigate instability, to remain patient during uncertainty, and to recognize how quickly power could shift within Rome. Over time, his ambition became increasingly visible, not loud or reckless, but steady, calculated. And while Rome continued expanding across the Mediterranean, Julius Caesar quietly began moving toward the center of its political world. As Julius Caesar entered adulthood, the Roman Republic was becoming increasingly divided between powerful political interests. Rome had grown wealthy through expansion, but that wealth was unevenly distributed. Some citizens lived in enormous villas decorated with marble and imported goods, while many others struggled in crowded districts near the center of the city. Political alliances shifted constantly. Senators competed for influence through speeches, favors, and public reputation. In this environment, ambition alone was not enough. A Roman leader needed visibility, military success, public support, and carefully managed relationships with powerful figures. Caesar understood this well. He began his public career through smaller political and administrative roles, gradually building recognition within Roman society. He was known for his confidence, intelligence, and ability to speak persuasively before large crowds. But beneath the surface of Roman politics, danger remained constant. Rivalries were intense, and public life often carried personal risk. At one point during his early career, Caesar was captured by pirates while traveling across the Mediterranean Sea. The event became one of the more unusual moments of his youth. While held captive, Caesar reportedly remained calm and even spoke to the pirates with confidence rather than fear. After his release, he later organized forces to pursue them. The story spread widely and contributed to his growing reputation for composure and determination. Meanwhile, Rome itself continued to expand outward through military campaigns across Europe and the Mediterranean. Successful generals returned home with wealth, influence, and armies deeply loyal to them personally. This gradual shift changed the balance of the Republic. Military authority was becoming increasingly connected to political power. Caesar recognized that military success would be essential if he wished to rise further within Roman society. Eventually, he received opportunities to command forces abroad. These experiences exposed him to the realities of leadership beyond the streets of Rome. He observed how armies functioned, how territories were governed, and how discipline shaped military effectiveness. At the same time, his political alliances within Rome continued to strengthen. He formed connections with influential individuals whose support helped expand his reach within the Republic's complex political structure. Yet Rome remained unstable beneath its appearance of order. Competition for power continued to intensify, and Caesar, who had once been a young observer of Roman politics, was slowly becoming one of its central figures. The path ahead would take him far beyond speeches and political ceremonies. It would lead him toward military campaigns that would permanently reshape both his life and the future of Rome itself. As Julius Caesar's influence within the Republic continued to grow, he moved steadily closer to the position that many ambitious Romans sought, but few could safely hold. Power in Rome was rarely concentrated in one place for long. The Republic had been designed to prevent any single individual from becoming too dominant. Authority was divided among senators, magistrates, and military leaders, all competing within a delicate balance. But by Caesar's time, that balance had begun to weaken. Military commanders now held enormous influence through the loyalty of their armies, and political alliances often carried more weight than traditional institutions. Caesar adapted to this changing environment with careful precision. He strengthened his public image through generosity, political visibility, and strategic relationships with powerful figures. At the same time, he understood that true influence in Rome increasingly depended on military achievement. Eventually, Caesar received command over territories in Gaul, a vast region north of Italy that covered much of modern-day France and surrounding areas. This assignment would become one of the defining periods of his life. The campaigns in Gaul lasted for years. Roman legions marched through forests, crossed rivers, and established fortified camps across unfamiliar territory. Conditions were often difficult. Winters were cold. Supply lines stretched across long distances, and resistance from local tribes varied in both size and intensity. Caesar's leadership during these campaigns significantly expanded his reputation. He emphasized organization, discipline, and rapid movement within the Roman military structure. Legions under his command became highly coordinated forces capable of adapting to changing battlefield conditions. At the same time, Caesar carefully documented many of these campaigns through written accounts. These writings were not only historical records, they also shaped public perception back in Rome. Citizens who had never seen Gaul could now imagine distant forests, military camps, and expanding Roman influence through Caesar's descriptions. As victories accumulated, his popularity grew. But so did concern among some members of the Roman Senate. Many feared that Caesar's military success and loyal legions were giving him too much influence. The Republic's old political safeguards were becoming increasingly fragile, and beneath the outward appearance of Roman order, tension was steadily building between Caesar and those who wished to limit his power. The campaigns in Gaul had transformed him. He was no longer simply a politician navigating the complexities of Rome. He had become a military leader with enormous prestige, loyal armies, and growing influence across the Republic. And as his campaigns continued, Rome itself slowly moved closer toward a conflict that would change its future forever. As Julius Caesar's victories in Gaul continued, his influence within Rome expanded far beyond what many senators had expected. Reports of military success traveled back to the capital regularly. Each victory strengthened his public image and increased admiration among ordinary citizens. To many Romans, Caesar represented strength, order, and expansion during a period of political uncertainty. But within the Senate, concern deepened. The Republic had long feared the concentration of power in a single individual, and now Caesar commanded experienced legions, whose loyalty was directed more toward him personally than toward the state itself. This shift created growing tension between Caesar and several political leaders in Rome. Among them was Pompey, once one of Caesar's political allies. Over time, alliances changed, trust weakened, and the balance of power began to collapse. The Senate eventually demanded that Caesar surrender command of his armies before returning to Rome. For many political figures, This was presented as a defense of the Republic's traditions. But Caesar understood the deeper implication. Without military protection, he would become vulnerable to political prosecution and the ambitions of his rivals. The situation placed him before a decision that would alter Roman history permanently. In the year 49 BCE, Caesar moved south toward Italy with his forces. At the edge of Roman territory stood a small river known as the Rubicon. Roman law prohibited generals from crossing into Italy with an army. Doing so would be viewed as an act against the authority of the Republic itself. For a moment, the future remained uncertain. Then Caesar crossed the river. The action was brief in movement, but enormous in consequence. Civil war began. Rome, which had expanded across the Mediterranean through conquest, now turned inward against itself. Political alliances fractured. Cities chose sides, and Roman citizens found themselves divided between competing visions of leadership and authority. Caesar advanced steadily through Italy with relatively limited resistance at first. Many of his opponents withdrew, regrouping in other regions to continue the conflict. The war extended across multiple territories, involving campaigns far beyond Rome itself. Throughout these years, Caesar continued to rely on the qualities that had shaped his rise: speed, organization, adaptability, and careful calculation. Yet beneath the military victories, the Republic itself was changing. The old balance of shared political power was weakening rapidly, and Caesar, once a young politician navigating Roman speeches and alliances, was now at the center of a transformation that would redefine Rome forever. The Civil War gradually shifted the structure of Rome itself. As Julius Caesar gained victories against rival forces, resistance within the Republic weakened step by step. Campaigns stretched across different regions of the Mediterranean world. Battles were fought not only for territory, but for the future direction of Roman power. Caesar's forces continued to demonstrate discipline and coordination during these campaigns. His ability to move quickly and adapt to changing situations allowed him to maintain momentum even in uncertain conditions. Meanwhile, political authority in Rome became increasingly centered around his leadership. The Senate still existed. Traditional institutions still operated, but the balance between collective governance and individual influence had fundamentally changed. Over time, Caesar returned to Rome not simply as a victorious general, but as the dominant political figure within the Republic. Public celebrations marked his victories. Crowds gathered in the streets, and his image became closely associated with stability after years of internal conflict. At the same time, however, concern among certain senators intensified. Many feared that the Republic's traditional structure was disappearing. Rome had always resisted the idea of kingship since the earliest period of the Republic. The concentration of power in one individual was viewed by some as a direct threat to Roman political identity. Caesar himself introduced numerous reforms during this period. Administrative systems were reorganized. Debt policies were adjusted. Infrastructure projects expanded, and efforts were made to stabilize parts of Roman governance after years of instability. To many citizens, these changes improved order and efficiency, but to others, they reinforced fears that authority was becoming too centralized. As Caesar's influence grew, so did the atmosphere of political tension surrounding him. Whispers of concern moved quietly through Senate halls and private gatherings. Some believed Rome needed strong leadership to survive. Others believed the Republic itself was slowly disappearing. Yet Caesar continued forward with confidence. He appeared publicly without visible fear. He maintained political activity, met with officials, and planned further campaigns beyond Rome's borders. But beneath the outward appearance of stability, opposition was organizing in silence. And within the marble walls of the Roman Senate, decisions were already beginning to form that would bring one chapter of Roman history to its end. As opposition against Julius Caesar quietly intensified, Rome entered one of the most fragile moments in its history. The Republic still appeared stable on the surface. Markets remained busy. Citizens continued gathering in public forums. Senators moved through marble corridors discussing laws, alliances, and military matters. But beneath this ordinary rhythm of daily life, distrust had become deeply rooted within the political elite. Many senators believed Caesar's growing authority threatened the traditional balance of the Republic. They feared that Rome was no longer governed by institutions, but by the influence of a single man. These fears gradually united individuals who otherwise held different political beliefs. Private meetings began taking place behind closed doors. Conversations lowered into whispers. Plans slowly formed within the Senate itself. At the center of these discussions stood a difficult question. Could the Republic survive if Caesar's power continued to expand? Meanwhile, Caesar appeared increasingly confident in his position. He continued introducing reforms, preparing future plans, and participating openly in public life. To many ordinary citizens, he remained admired. Years of instability had exhausted Rome, and Caesar's leadership seemed to offer structure and direction. Yet political stability built around one individual created deep unease among those who believed Rome's traditions were being replaced. As time moved forward, warnings reportedly reached Caesar from different sources. Some urged caution. Others feared growing hostility among senators. But Caesar, shaped by years of military success and political survival, seemed unwilling to believe that serious danger could emerge from within Rome itself. Then came the day known throughout history as the Ides of March. The Senate gathered inside the Theater of Pompey, where political meetings were being held temporarily. The atmosphere was formal, controlled, almost ordinary. Caesar arrived, surrounded not by armies, but by senators. Within moments, the tension that had quietly grown beneath Roman politics finally surfaced. The attack happened suddenly. Confusion filled the chamber. Voices echoed against stone walls, and the Republic, already weakened by years of conflict and concentrated power, crossed a point from which it could not fully return. Caesar's death did not restore stability. Instead, it created another cycle of uncertainty, political struggle, and transformation across Rome. The man who had reshaped the Republic through military victories and political ambition was gone, but the consequences of his rise and his fall would continue shaping Roman history long after the Senate chamber fell silent. The death of Julius Caesar did not bring peace back to Rome. Instead, it deepened the uncertainty that had already been growing within the Republic for years. Those who had participated in the assassination believed they were protecting Rome's traditional system of governance. They hoped that removing Caesar would restore political balance and prevent the rise of centralized rule. But history rarely returns to its previous form so easily. The moment Caesar fell inside the Senate chamber, a new struggle for power quietly began. News of the assassination spread rapidly through Rome. Crowds gathered in confusion across forums and streets. Some citizens reacted with fear, others with anger. Many simply waited, uncertain of what would happen next. The Republic itself now stood in a fragile position. Its institutions remained in place, but the stability beneath them had weakened significantly. Caesar's allies moved carefully in the days that followed. Among them was a young man named Octavian, later known as Augustus. Though still relatively unknown to much of Rome at the time, he would eventually play a defining role in shaping the future of the Roman world. Meanwhile, divisions between political factions intensified. Alliances shifted once again. Military loyalty became increasingly important, and Rome entered another period of internal conflict that stretched across multiple regions. The Republic, already transformed by Caesar's rise, was now moving toward an entirely new political era. Yet even as Rome changed, Caesar's influence did not disappear. His military campaigns, political reforms, and personal ambition had permanently altered the structure of Roman power. The republic that existed before him could no longer fully return. And in time, the system that emerged after his death would evolve into something even larger, the Roman Empire. But while Rome entered its next transformation, far to the east, centuries earlier, another young leader had once begun his own rise beneath very different skies, not among marble temples or crowded forums, but among mountains, horses, and the disciplined world of ancient Macedon. And his name was Alexander the Great. While Rome struggled beneath the weight of ambition and political conflict, another story had already echoed across the ancient world centuries earlier. A story not born from a republic, but from a kingdom of mountains, warriors, and restless ambition. Before Caesar crossed the Rubicon, before Rome ruled the Mediterranean, one young king marched farther than anyone thought possible. His armies crossed deserts, rivers, and unknown lands beneath endless skies, and by the age of 30, he had reshaped much of the known world. This is the life of Alexander the Great. Alexander was born in 356 BCE in the kingdom of Macedon, north of the Greek city-states that dominated much of the ancient Mediterranean world. Macedon was rugged and mountainous, with long valleys, forests, and fortified settlements surrounded by harsh terrain. Unlike the wealthy and highly intellectual cities of southern Greece, Macedon was often viewed by some Greeks as distant and less refined. Yet beneath that perception, the kingdom was quietly becoming stronger. Alexander's father, King Philip II, was transforming Macedon into a disciplined military power through organization, strategy, and reform. From an early age, Alexander grew up surrounded by soldiers, political discussions, and the realities of leadership. He was educated not only in warfare, but also in philosophy, literature, and history. One of his teachers was the philosopher Aristotle, whose lessons exposed Alexander to ideas about science, politics, geography, and the wider world beyond Macedon itself. These studies shaped the way he viewed ambition. To Alexander, the world beyond the horizon did not seem distant or unreachable. It seemed waiting. As a young boy, he was known for his intelligence, confidence, and intense determination. Stories of heroes such as Achilles deeply influenced him. He admired courage, glory, and the idea of leaving behind a name that history would remember. Meanwhile, King Philip continued strengthening Macedon's military structure. Soldiers trained in disciplined formations. Cavalry units became increasingly effective, and the kingdom expanded its influence across Greece. Alexander watched all of this carefully. He observed leadership not as an abstract idea, but as something lived daily through decisions, discipline, and authority. Yet even during these early years, there were signs that his ambition extended beyond the borders of Macedon itself. The world he inherited was already changing, and in time, Alexander would begin moving toward a future far larger than anyone around him could fully imagine. As Alexander grew older, the kingdom of Macedon continued expanding its influence across the Greek world. Under the leadership of his father, King Philip II, Macedon transformed from a relatively isolated northern kingdom into a dominant military power. Greek city-states that had once resisted Macedonian influence were gradually brought into alliance or submission. This shift changed the balance of power across the region. For Alexander, These years became a period of observation and preparation. He studied military organization closely. He watched experienced commanders manage armies, diplomacy, and political tension. At the same time, he developed a strong connection to the idea of heroic legacy. Ancient stories of warriors and conquerors shaped his imagination deeply. Among these figures, Achilles remained especially important to him. Alexander admired not only strength, but the idea of achieving something so significant that it would outlive an ordinary lifetime. As he entered adulthood, he began participating more directly in military and political matters. He accompanied campaigns, observed negotiations, and gained experience within the structure his father had built. Yet the stability of Macedon would soon face sudden change. King Philip II, whose reforms had created the foundation of Macedonian power, was assassinated unexpectedly. The event created immediate uncertainty within the kingdom. Political rivals, neighboring powers, and rebellious regions all saw opportunity in the sudden transition of leadership. Alexander was still young when he inherited the throne. Many doubted whether he could maintain control over such a rapidly expanding kingdom. But Alexander acted quickly. He secured support within Macedon, reinforced military loyalty, and moved decisively against revolts that threatened the stability of his rule. These early actions demonstrated qualities that would later define his leadership: speed, confidence, and an unwillingness to appear uncertain in moments of crisis. Once internal control was restored, Alexander inherited not only a kingdom, but also a larger vision. His father had planned campaigns against the Persian Empire, which at the time controlled enormous territories across Asia. The Persian Empire represented wealth, scale, and centuries of established authority. For many Greek states, it remained one of the most powerful political structures in the known world. Alexander now stood at the edge of that future. The armies of Macedon were prepared. The ambition for expansion already existed, and beyond the eastern horizon lay territories larger than anything he had ever ruled. The next stage of his life would no longer be about securing a kingdom. It would become about pursuing a conquest that would carry him farther than nearly any leader of the ancient world before him. After securing his position within Macedon, Alexander began preparing for what would become one of the most ambitious military campaigns in ancient history. The kingdom he inherited was stable, but the vision that guided him was far larger than its borders. To the east lay the Persian Empire, ruled by the Achaemenid dynasty, a vast political structure that stretched across Asia Minor, Egypt, and deep into the heart of Asia. It was an empire built over centuries, supported by established cities, administrative systems, and powerful armies. For many rulers, it would have seemed impossible to challenge, but Alexander saw it differently. Before crossing into Persian territory, he strengthened his army. Macedonian forces were organized into highly disciplined formations. The phalanx, a tightly arranged infantry structure, formed the core of his military strategy. Cavalry units provided speed and flexibility, allowing rapid movement during battle. Every part of the army was trained to operate with coordination and precision. As preparations continued, Alexander also focused on morale. He understood that his soldiers needed more than discipline. They needed belief in the campaign itself. Stories of past heroes and shared identity within the army helped create a sense of purpose among his troops. Eventually, the campaign began. Macedonian forces crossed into Asia Minor, marking the start of direct confrontation with Persian-controlled regions. The early stages of the campaign involved a series of battles near coastal and inland territories. Persian forces, while numerically strong in many regions, were often structured differently, relying on regional satraps and varying levels of coordination. Alexander's approach emphasized speed and concentrated force. Rather than engaging in prolonged static conflict, he aimed to strike key positions decisively. As victories accumulated, cities along the western edge of the Persian Empire began to fall under Macedonian control. Each success extended his influence further into unfamiliar territory. Yet the campaign was not only military in nature. Alexander also encountered the complexity of governing newly acquired regions. Different cultures, traditions, and administrative systems required adaptation. In some cases, local structures were preserved under new leadership. In others, Macedonian systems were introduced gradually. This combination of military expansion and administrative adjustment allowed his influence to extend steadily deeper into Asia. With each advance, the scale of the world he was entering became more apparent. This was no longer a regional conflict. It was the beginning of a confrontation between two vast systems of power. And, as Alexander moved further east, the path ahead became increasingly uncertain, but also increasingly significant in the shaping of ancient history. As Alexander's campaign moved deeper into Persian territory, the scale of the conflict began to change. What had started as a regional military advance was now unfolding into a confrontation with one of the largest empires of the ancient world. The Achaemenid Persian Empire was vast, stretching across diverse landscapes, mountains, deserts, fertile plains, and major urban centers connected by long-established routes of administration and trade. Its structure was different from Macedon. Rather than a single centralized system, it functioned through a network of regional governors known as satraps, each responsible for managing their own territory while remaining loyal to the Persian king. This system allowed the empire to cover enormous distances, but it also meant that coordination between regions could vary depending on local leadership. Alexander advanced steadily through these lands. Each region he encountered introduced new challenges, different terrain, unfamiliar cities, and varied military responses. Some areas resisted strongly, others were absorbed with less conflict. As he progressed, Alexander continued to rely on speed, discipline, and concentrated force. His army remained highly structured, with clear communication between infantry, cavalry, and support units. This organization allowed him to maintain momentum even across long and difficult campaigns. At the same time, Alexander began to adapt to the realities of governing newly captured territories. Rather than completely replacing existing systems, he often incorporated local administration into his expanding control structure. This approach reduced resistance in many regions and allowed for more stable governance during ongoing expansion. As Macedonian influence spread, cities that once stood at the edge of the Persian world now found themselves part of a rapidly changing political landscape. Trade routes shifted, administrative control adjusted, and cultural interactions increased across regions that had previously operated independently. Despite these changes, resistance from the Persian Empire itself remained significant. Major confrontations were still ahead. The conflict was far from over, and the balance of power across the region was still in motion. Alexander continued moving eastward, driven by a combination of strategic ambition and the momentum of previous victories. Each step further into Persian territory brought him closer to the heart of the empire, and with each advance the scale of what he was attempting became even more apparent. Not just a campaign of conquest, but a transformation of the ancient world's political landscape. As Alexander advanced further into the heart of the Persian Empire, the conflict began to shift from frontier battles into confrontations that carried greater political and symbolic weight. The Persian Empire, under the rule of its king, represented not only military strength, but also centuries of established authority, culture, and administrative tradition. Its cities were large and structured with palaces, marketplaces, and organized systems of governance that had developed over generations. As Macedonian forces moved deeper into this environment, each encounter became more significant. The terrain itself began to vary more dramatically, ranging from fertile river valleys to arid landscapes and fortified urban centers. Alexander continued to rely on his established approach: rapid movement, disciplined formations, and focused engagement, rather than prolonged static warfare. This allowed his forces to maintain initiative even in unfamiliar regions. At the same time, the nature of the campaign became increasingly complex. It was no longer only about defeating opposing armies. It also involved managing newly captured territories, stabilizing local conditions, and maintaining continuity of control across expanding distances. In some regions, local leaders were incorporated into the new administrative structure. In others, changes in leadership were implemented to ensure alignment with Macedonian authority. This flexible approach allowed the campaign to progress without requiring complete restructuring of every region encountered. As time passed, news of Alexander's advance spread further into the Persian interior. Cities began preparing in advance for possible confrontation. Regional leaders communicated across long distances to coordinate responses. The empire, while still vast and powerful, was now reacting to a rapidly moving external force that was steadily approaching its central regions. Alexander's army, meanwhile, continued to grow in experience and cohesion. Each campaign strengthened coordination between units and deepened understanding of the varied environments they were passing through. The momentum of the campaign created a sense of continuous movement forward. Yet beneath this progression, the scale of what lay ahead was becoming clearer. The heart of the Persian Empire had not yet been reached, and the most decisive confrontations were still to come. As Alexander moved onward, history was gradually approaching one of its most significant turning points. As Alexander's campaign moved deeper into the Persian heartlands, the scale of the confrontation continued to grow. The Persian Empire was no longer merely defending its borders. It was now responding directly to the advance of a force that had crossed half the known world. The political center of Persia began to feel the pressure of continuous Macedonian movement. Communication lines stretched across vast distances, carrying urgent reports from distant regions. Some areas attempted to organize coordinated resistance. Others focused on reinforcing key strategic positions along likely routes of advance. Alexander, however, maintained his consistent approach. He did not slow his momentum. Instead, he adapted to each new region as it came, adjusting strategy based on terrain, resistance, and available resources. His army continued to operate with high discipline. Infantry formations remained tightly coordinated. Cavalry units provided flexibility and speed. Logistical systems ensured that movement could continue across extended campaigns. As he advanced, Alexander also encountered increasingly complex environments of governance and culture. Some cities had long-established administrative systems tied to the Persian structure. Others were more autonomous, shaped by local traditions and regional leadership. In many cases, Alexander incorporated existing systems into his expanding control rather than replacing them entirely. This allowed stability to be maintained while expansion continued. But the deeper he moved into the empire, the more significant each engagement became. These were no longer distant frontier conflicts. They were direct interactions with the core structure of Persian power. At the same time, awareness of Alexander's approach spread further into the interior. Preparations became more concentrated. regional coordination increased, and anticipation of large-scale confrontation began to build. The Persian Empire, vast and established, was now fully engaged in responding to a rapidly advancing campaign that was reshaping the balance of power across the region. Alexander's progress continued steadily. Each step forward brought him closer to the central regions of the empire, where the most decisive encounters of the campaign would take place. And as both forces moved toward convergence, the ancient world stood on the edge of one of its most significant historical turning points. As Alexander's advance reached the deepest regions of the Persian Empire, the tension across the entire territory became undeniable. The campaign had now entered its final and most decisive phase. The Persian leadership understood that previous defensive efforts had not been enough to halt the Macedonian movement. As a result, larger and more concentrated forces were gathered, and key strategic locations were prepared for confrontation. The landscape itself began to reflect the scale of what was approaching. Wide plains that once served as open passageways now became potential battlegrounds. Cities that once operated independently were now connected through urgent coordination, and the flow of information across the empire accelerated under pressure. Alexander continued to move with the same disciplined momentum that had defined his entire campaign. His strategy remained consistent: maintain speed, concentrate force, and engage decisively when conditions were favorable. But as he approached the core regions of the empire, the scale of resistance increased significantly. This was no longer fragmented opposition. It was structured, organized, and concentrated around the central authority of the Persian world. Both sides now prepared for a confrontation that would determine the direction of the entire region. Armies were positioned carefully across vast terrain. Scouts moved continuously between formations, reporting changes in positioning and movement. The atmosphere before engagement was marked by stillness and anticipation rather than immediate action. At this stage, the campaign had transformed into something larger than its initial objectives. It was now a decisive moment in the balance between two great systems of power. One shaped by centuries of imperial tradition, the other driven by rapid expansion and unified military structure. Alexander's forces remained steady and organized, waiting for the moment when strategy would shift into action. The Persian forces, equally prepared, stood ready to defend the core of their empire. And between these two worlds, the ancient landscape held a quiet tension that suggested history was approaching a turning point that would be remembered long after the events themselves had passed. Alexander's final campaign marked the peak of a journey that had begun in the mountains of Macedon and stretched across continents never before united under a single commander. By the time he reached the deepest regions of the Persian world, There were no more borders in the way he had first known them, only distance, terrain, and the weight of an empire reshaped through movement. The Persian political structure, once vast and stable, had been fundamentally transformed by years of continuous pressure and conflict. Cities that once stood at the center of imperial authority now existed within a new reality shaped by Macedonian influence. Yet despite the scale of his victories, Alexander's journey was not defined only by conquest. It was also defined by constant adaptation. Each region he entered required understanding, adjustment, and integration. Different cultures, languages, and systems of governance had to be approached not as obstacles, but as parts of a larger world now connected through a single expanding framework. His army, which had followed him across deserts, rivers, and mountain passes, had also changed over time. What began as a Macedonian force had become a diverse and experienced military structure shaped by years of continuous movement and engagement. But every expansion carries a turning point, and eventually, even the greatest campaigns reach their natural limit. After years of relentless advancement, Alexander's journey began to slow, not because of defeat, but because of exhaustion, distance, and the sheer scale of what had been accomplished. The world he had crossed was larger than any single campaign could continue to expand without pause. In time, his focus began to shift away from further conquest and toward consolidation, bringing order to the vast territories already touched by his influence. But history does not remain still long enough for any single vision to fully settle. As Alexander's presence spread across distant lands, new challenges naturally emerged within the structure he had created. And while his personal journey would eventually come to an end, the world he had reshaped would continue to evolve long after his final days. Empires would change again, borders would shift, and new powers would rise from the foundations left behind. But the scale of his journey remained unprecedented. From a young king in Macedon to a conqueror of empires, Alexander's story became one of the most far-reaching movements of the ancient world. And as his chapter closed, the ancient world did not stop. It simply turned the page. The age of Alexander did not end with a single moment. It faded gradually, like a distant echo across lands that had once marched under his banner. After his passing, the structure he had built did not remain unified for long. The vast territories that had been connected through his campaigns began to drift into separate regions, each influenced by local leaders, former generals, and emerging political powers. What had once moved under a single vision slowly transformed into multiple directions. Some regions maintained elements of Macedonian influence. Others returned to older systems of governance, and many blended both traditions into new forms of authority. The world he had reshaped did not disappear. It reorganized itself. Cities that had once been part of a continuous campaign became independent centers of culture, trade, and administration. Ideas, however, continued to move. Military tactics, architectural styles, and philosophical thought spread across regions long after the campaigns had ended. In this way, Alexander's influence persisted not as a single empire, but as a network of cultural and historical connections. Time moved forward, and as it always does in history, new powers began to rise from the foundations left behind. The Mediterranean world entered new periods of competition and transformation. In the East, older imperial traditions continued to evolve, and across different regions, new states began shaping their own identities from the remnants of past empires. History, in this sense, never truly concludes. It transitions from one structure to another, from one balance of power to the next, from one age into the beginning of another. And as the ancient world continued to unfold, the stories of its greatest figures remained woven into its foundation, quietly influencing everything that came after them. Now, as this journey reaches its end, the perspective shifts once again. We leave behind the movement of armies, the rise of kings, and the expansion of empires, and we return to something even older than conquest itself, a world where the first civilizations began to take shape, a world of rivers, temples, and early cities, a world known as Mesopotamia. And from here, let's getting slowly for the helping sleep. Before we begin, slowly, just allow yourself to relax. You're about to travel back in time, not as a history lesson, but as a quiet experience. A journey into the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, the cradle of early civilization, where rivers shaped cities and cities shaped history. Imagine yourself standing in this ancient world. The air is warm, the ground is dry and timeless, and everything feels distant, yet present. There's no rush here, no urgency, only the slow rhythm of history unfolding. As you begin to walk, you are not just observing the past, you are moving through it. The sound of distant rivers, the soft wind over stone paths, the quiet life of ancient cities, all begin to surround you. As you begin to walk, you are not just observing the past, you are moving through it. The sound of distant rivers, the soft wind over stone paths, the quiet life of ancient cities all begin to surround you. And with every step you take, your thoughts begin to slow, your breath becomes softer, your body becomes lighter. You are safe here. You are calm here. And now, as we move deeper into this ancient world, we begin our journey through Mesopotamia. And slowly, very gently, you may begin to drift.
Not away from the story, but into it. Let the ancient world guide you. And as we continue, you may find yourself slowly falling asleep while walking through history.
The night is calm, not completely silent, but soft. The kind of quiet that feels alive, as if the world itself is slowly breathing. You are walking slowly, without effort. The ground beneath your feet is warm stone, still holding the memory of the sun. Each step is steady and quiet, blending into the rhythm of the night. Above you, the sky stretches wide and endless, filled with distant stars. In the distance, you begin to see a city, ancient, vast, and resting peacefully in the night. Babylon. It doesn't call to you, yet you move toward it. The road feels calm, and time itself seems to slow with every step. A gentle breeze passes by, warm and soft, carrying the scent of earth and water. You take a slow breath and begin to relax even more. The night continues, and you are still walking. As you come closer, tall walls rise before you, softened by moonlight. Torches flicker gently, casting a warm and steady glow. You step inside, and the air changes, cooler, softer, more calm. Somewhere nearby, you hear water flowing, a quiet and steady sound that draws you forward. You follow it slowly through silent streets. Everything feels distant, peaceful, and unhurried. And then rising before you in soft layers, you see the hanging gardens. Water flows gently from one level to another. Leaves move softly in the night air. You take a step forward, then another. The world becomes even quieter as you enter. The garden breathes slowly, and the night continues. You move deeper into the gardens, and the world becomes even quieter. Not empty, but softer, as if every sound has been gently lowered. The air is cool here, comfortable. It touches your skin like a calm breath. Water is everywhere now. Not loud, not rushing, just flowing, steady, endless. You follow a narrow stone path between the terraces. Above you, layers of green rise into the night sky. Below you, water moves slowly through carved channels. Each drop of water falls gently from one level to another. Soft, rhythmic, like the garden itself is breathing in silence. You slow down without even noticing, your steps becoming lighter, quieter. The sound of water surrounds you now, not overwhelming, but complete, filling every space between the stones, between the leaves, between your thoughts. Somewhere nearby, a small stream flows under stone arches, hidden, protected, constant. You pause for a moment and simply listen. There is no need to move quickly here, no need to reach anywhere. The garden does not ask anything from you. It only exists and invites you to exist with it. Leaves shift softly above your head, a gentle movement, almost invisible, like the night is breathing through them. Water continues to flow, layer after layer, stone after stone, time after time. And you realize something simple. You're no longer just walking through the garden. You are part of its silence now. Everything slows even more, thoughts fading gently into the background, leaving only the sound of water and calm. The hanging gardens feel endless here, not because they are large, but because they are still. And in that stillness, you begin to relax even deeper. The night continues quietly around you, and you continue with it. You stay in the quiet of the gardens. Time here feels softer now, almost as if it no longer moves forward in a straight line, but flows gently like water. The sound of the streams never changes, always steady, always calm. You begin to walk again, but slower than before, as if even movement has become optional. Stone steps lead you slightly higher into the terraces, each step warm from the memory of the day. Above you, hanging vines sway almost invisibly in the night air, soft shadows moving across stone walls. You notice how the water is guided through small carved channels, each one carefully shaped, each one letting water pass without resistance. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is simply continuous. Somewhere deeper in the garden, water falls from a higher level, a soft, distant sound like a whisper repeating itself through stone. You follow that sound without thinking, not because you must, but because it feels natural. The air becomes even cooler as you move upward, and more still. Every breath feels easier now, deeper, slower. You pass beneath an arch covered in plants, leaves gently brushing the stone above your head. For a moment you stop again, just standing there, listening. Nothing calls you forward, nothing pulls you back. There is only this moment, this quiet space between water and night. And in that space, everything feels balanced, soft, complete. The garden breathes slowly around you, and you breathe with it. The night continues, and you continue gently within it. You move even deeper into the upper terraces. The higher you go, the quieter everything becomes. Not because sound disappears, but because it no longer feels separate from you. Water still flows beside you, but now it sounds distant, like a memory of movement rather than movement itself. The stone here is older, smoother, shaped by time and constant water. You place your hand gently against it as you walk. It feels cool, still, grounded. Above, the garden opens slightly, revealing more of the night sky. Stars scattered like quiet thoughts across darkness. The air is lighter here, almost weightless, as if the garden is slowly releasing you from everything unnecessary. A soft breeze moves through the leaves, barely noticeable, yet it changes nothing and everything at the same time. You pause again, longer this time. There is no direction now, no path that feels more important than another. Only stillness, only breath. Somewhere far below, water continues its endless cycle through stone channels. But here, at this height, it feels like a distant heartbeat. Steady, calm. You begin to realize the garden is not something you are moving through anymore. It is something you are resting inside. The distinction between you and the garden begins to soften, like the edges of a dream gently fading. Everything becomes simpler, quieter, lighter. And in that simplicity, there is rest. The night holds you gently, and you no longer feel the need to go anywhere else. You remain in that quiet place. The upper terraces of the garden are now still around you, not empty, but complete in their silence. Even the sound of water feels distant here, like it belongs to another layer of the world. You stand between stone and sky, between movement and stillness. And for a moment, nothing changes. The night feels suspended, as if time itself has slowed down enough to be barely noticeable. A soft wind passes through the garden, touching leaves, then disappearing, without direction, without urgency. You breathe in slowly and hold nothing in return. The air feels clean, light, calming in a way that asks nothing from you. Below, the city of Babylon rests quietly. Its distant presence no longer feels separate, just part of the same calm world you are in. You take a small step forward, then stop again, not because you have arrived somewhere, but because there is nowhere else to reach. The hanging gardens are no longer something you observe. They are something you are surrounded by, something you exist within. Stone, water, leaves, night, all blending into a single quiet rhythm. Even your thoughts begin to slow, fading gently into the background, one by one. Until there is almost nothing left to think, only feeling, only stillness. The garden does not change, and it does not need to, because it is already enough, exactly as it is. And you are enough here too, without movement, without effort, just present, just resting, just part of the quiet night. You stay there a little longer without needing to move. The hanging gardens are completely still around you now, not silent in absence, but silent in fullness. Every sound that remains feels distant and softened. Water, wind, leaves, all blending into one gentle presence. You notice how even your awareness feels lighter, less focused, less sharp, as if the garden is slowly carrying your thoughts away from you, one by one. There is no need to hold on to anything anymore, no need to follow anything. Just this moment, this quiet space, this still night. The stone beneath you feels steady and warm from the day that has passed. The air above you feels endless and calm. And between them, you simply exist. Far below, Babylon continues its quiet life, but it no longer feels distant, only connected, like part of the same breath. You take another slow breath and release it without effort. Nothing changes, and yet everything feels softer. The garden does not guide you anymore. It simply holds you. And in that holding, There is comfort. There is calm. There is rest. You no longer feel the need to continue walking because the journey... And now, even that sense of movement begins to fade. Not suddenly, but gently, like a final layer of awareness slowly dissolving into the night. The hanging gardens remain around you, but they no longer feel like a place you are in. They feel like a feeling, soft, endless, calm. The sound of water continues somewhere far away, but it no longer pulls your attention. It simply exists, like a distant memory of peace. You are no longer searching, no longer observing. There is only stillness now. The air feels heavier in a comforting way, as if it is gently holding you in place, not restricting, just supporting. Your thoughts slow even further, each one fading before it can fully form, until there is almost nothing left to follow. Only awareness, soft and quiet. The garden, the city, the world beyond it, all begin to feel distant, not gone, just far away. And what remains is this moment, this calm. And as you drift even deeper into stillness, the boundaries between sound and silence begin to fade completely. The hanging gardens are no longer something you can clearly sense, not because they are gone, but because they are no longer separate from you. Everything becomes softer, quieter, slower. Even the idea of movement feels distant now, like something that belongs to another time. There is only calm, only presence, only the gentle rhythm of stillness that holds everything together. You do not need to understand anything anymore. You do not need to follow anything. All that remains is this quiet sense of being, light, soft, endless. The sound of water, the breath of wind, the memory of stone and garden, all of it fades into a single quiet feeling, peace. And as you drift even deeper into stillness, the boundaries between sound and silence begin to fade completely. The hanging gardens are no longer something you can clearly sense, not because they are gone, but because they are no longer separate from you. Everything becomes softer, quieter, slower. Even the idea of movement feels distant now, like something that belongs to another time. There is only calm, only presence, only the gentle rhythm of stillness that holds everything together. You do not need to understand anything anymore. You do not need to follow anything. All that remains is this quiet sense of being, light, soft, endless. The sound of water, the breath of wind, The memory of stone and garden, all of it fades into a single quiet feeling, peace. And now there is nothing left to follow. No path, no sound, no direction. Only a deep and quiet stillness that surrounds everything equally. The hanging gardens are no longer a place in your mind, not even a memory. Just a soft presence, blending into the calm of the night. Even time feels distant now, as if it has slowed down enough to disappear completely. There is no movement forward and no return. Only the feeling of being held gently by something vast and peaceful. You are not thinking anymore, not searching, not observing, just resting. The air feels weightless. The silence feels complete. And in that completeness, everything softens even more. Thoughts dissolve before they form. Feelings dissolve before they rise, until only calm remains. A calm that does not change, a calm that does not move, a calm that simply is. You are not separate from it anymore. You are part of it. And as the night continues without end, you continue with it, gently, quietly, and completely at rest. And now even the thought of continuing begins to fade, not as something lost, but as something that is no longer needed. Everything has already softened into stillness. There is no direction left to follow, no distance left to cross. Only this quiet, endless calm. It does not grow, it does not shrink. It simply remains, like the gentle space between thoughts, like the pause between breaths. You are no longer holding on to anything, not even awareness itself. Just resting deeply, quietly, without effort. The world feels far away now, not gone, just unimportant in this moment of peace. And yet, nothing is missing. Everything feels complete. The stillness does not ask anything from you. It does not guide you. It does not shape you. It simply holds you gently, without resistance. And in that holding, you begin to let go even more. Not into sleep, not into wakefulness, but into something softer than both. A place where nothing needs to continue and nothing needs to end. Only calm remains, and you remain with it, fully at ease, fully still, and completely at rest. And now, there is nothing more to continue. No story left to follow, no place left to reach. Only this final stillness, soft, complete, and endless. The garden, the city, the night. All of it gently fades away, not disappearing suddenly, but slowly, like a distant dream losing its shape. What remains is calm, pure, quiet calm. You do not need to think anymore. You do not need to follow anything. There is only rest, deeper than thought, softer than silence. And as this moment settles completely, even the feeling of time begins to dissolve. There is no before, no after, only now, stretching endlessly, without effort, without change. You are safe here, completely at ease. Nothing is required of you anymore. And so you simply rest, gently, quietly, fully at peace. And the night continues, without end, as you drift deeper into calm. And now even that final sense of continuation begins to soften. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to follow. Only a deep and quiet presence that fills everything equally. The idea of distance fades. The idea of movement fades. Even the feeling of you becomes lighter, softer, almost weightless. Everything is still here, and yet nothing needs to be noticed anymore. The world does not end. It simply becomes quiet. Like a long breath slowly settling into silence. There is no effort in this place, no direction, no urgency, only calm. A calm that does not ask for attention, a calm that does not change. You are not moving toward anything now. You are simply resting within what already is. Soft, still, endless. And as this quiet continues, even that awareness begins to gently fade into peace, until there is nothing left to do and nothing left to become. Only rest, only stillness, and you remain there, completely calm, completely quiet, and gently at sleep. Long before great empires ruled the world, there was a quiet beginning. In the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, between two great rivers, life began to organize itself into